Welcome to The Aftermath, a podcast that rips the Band-Aid off the collective scars of divorce, custody battles, and the trauma of family drama. Kendra Reiber and Mick Smith pull back the curtain and explore stories that put the heart-wrenching puzzle pieces together with inspiring stories, notable experts, and actionable tips. Let the healing begin. Welcome once again. This is The Aftermath, and I am the Doctor of Digital. And we also have Kendra, our legislative advocate. Kendra, how are you today to this episode of The Aftermath?
I am wonderful. I am coming to you from a hotel room. So we are busy, busy, busy this week. But, we take time out when we have important guests that we want to talk to. So I'm looking forward to it today.
And we do have a great guest today. But, before we get to that, we do have something important because we want to know what was the deal with your hair? I guess you have a new hairstyle.
Yeah, I do. I guess. I don't know. It's style different today. That's the important thing. That's what
You
matters.
got a you got a cut, didn't you?
I, I, a while ago, I just styled it really different. Yeah.
No,
The color
okay. I
different.
saw
Yeah.
something online. So yeah. And where
Oh,
are you?
you're right. I forgot about that. Yes.
See,
That was
okay, I'm
last
paying
week, Mick.
attention.
Come on.
I'm your biggest fan. So usually in Ohio, where would you be now traveling?
I am now in South Carolina.
All right.
So, yeah.
Well, looking forward to the guest today. We have David Shubert, who will be our guest, and he's got an exciting tale to tell. We want to get him on. So let's welcome on the show. And David, it's great to have you on. We'd like to talk to you a little bit about what your experiences have been like. So if you could give us maybe the 30-second version, so then we'll ask you some questions to follow up. So welcome to the program, David.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, David, where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Montana, as you can tell by the slow way I talk, but I've been living in Colorado for about the last 30 years,
Okay.
amongst other places around the world.
Okay. Great. Well, tell us a little bit about your history. What brings you here today, and what you're kind of doing to make some things change here in the world.
Well, I am what they call a left behind and alienated father. What that means is that back in 2007, my wife at the time had abducted both my daughter as well as stepson and took them overseas. And unfortunately, I got caught up in the middle of that because of the fact she did it to escape bills, tried to hijack me for money if I ever want to see them again. When I didn't do that, the alienation began, which is a terrible thing when a parent, be it mother or father, can't be in the lives of their children and vice versa. So I wound up going through the International Hague Convention courts. I was successful in seeking an order of their return. Took 16 months total once it was filed. But I got them back here to Colorado. And a judge here goes, well, it concerns me about this and it concerns me about this. However, they've been gone for almost 2 years now. It's in their best interest, allowed the mother to keep the children and return to the country where they were just ordered from. The alienation continued, and obviously it's taken a tremendous toll upon my children in the process. I know I did get one of my kids back, my daughter, just last year, but I can see with her how damaging this was on her mentally and emotionally and how it's coming, you know, the people don't understand the judges, these other whack jobs out there who are going, it's not real. It's like it's never happened to you, but it is real,
Sure.
so in time, I wound up putting aside everything I was feeling and wound up becoming an activist for family rights in the area of alienation and for left behind parents as well.
So you had a question there, or I have a question on for people who are not familiar with the Hague Convention, because we have had this come up before, but could you tell us where you're from? So you're in the United States, but where did they end up? And what's this with the Hague Convention?
Well, there's almost 1,000 reported, and I use the term reported, but there's almost 1,000 reported children that are abducted by a parent and taken overseas. Well, a lot of times when it happens, you don't know where to turn. Fortunately, though it took 4 months, I learned that there is such a thing as the Hague Convention, which part of it deals with the aspect of children who are wrongfully removed from the United States in order to get them brought back to the country of origin so that the courts here can decide who the children are going to remain with. Now, what happened in my case is that, like I say, it took about 4 months to find out. I got a hold of the Office of Children's Issues, who is part of the U.S. Department of State, and they assisted me in lodging my application for an order of return. And along with NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the assistance of several other agencies and nonprofits, we were successful in getting them back. You
So,
know,
David, I have some questions with that. Eh, Did you have any experience in dealing with any of these agencies or had any idea before you got started in this?
oh heck no, heck, I'd never even heard of the term parental alienation, let alone parental abduction before. You know, until it happened to me, that is, and I had to get educated real quick. And in doing that, I got on the internet. I was going to Facebook groups. I was going through Google searches and trying to find out everything I could because I know the day that it happened, this is the interesting part about it. Our law enforcement many times are uneducated, or for lack of a better term, just idiots when it comes to family law cases. Because as soon as I found out that at the time we were married, as soon as I found out my ex-wife had abducted my children and were at the airport in Denver, I contacted the police department and the sheriff's department, and they came out to my house. And I told them, I said, get to the airport, stop them before they get on that plane. You know what they told me? They said, well, even if we were lucky enough to locate them, there's nothing we could do. And I says, why is that? And they says, well, she could say, well, you know what? I'm the mother. I have the constitutional right to take them on vacation if I choose to, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And the police says, if she would have said that, she's right. Later on, I found out the cops were wrong, that they could have stopped her because I did have 50-50 shared custody because we were still married and it was absent of any court order that would have allowed her to remove the children.
Yeah, but there is a disconnect between the law enforcement and the courts. I agree with you. There is a disconnect, lack of knowledge.
Right. And I think on both ends of the spectrum, that's like with family courts as an example. I don't, not all states are like this, but here in Colorado, a judge, he can be hearing, a family law case. And right after lunch, he's hearing a criminal case. Now, for a judge to know the full spectrum of the law on both ends of things, that must be one smart cookie. You know that, or he's unable to do something proficiently because there's no way possible. And the ones that are hearing family court cases, I think they need to be mandated where they take remedial classes every year to keep up to date on new legislation. They need to be educated about parental alienation. And I know a lot of people take that term in the courtrooms of parental alienation. They like hostile, aggressive parenting and everything else like that. To me, that's a bunch of hogwash. It kind of goes back to one of the articles I'd written, stick and bow ties. Basically, you can take a pig, and you can either put the lipstick on it or a bow tie on it, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig. Well, that's the same thing with parental alienation. If you look up that term in the dictionary, it's quite clear about what it means. So for these people that say, oh, that's too offensive of a term, I don't really care. It's what it is.
Yes. Unfortunately, it's really easy in our court systems to prove physical abuse, but not emotional abuse. And that's really what we're dealing with here, the psychological, emotional trauma with the children. And it's so hard to prove. Sorry to interrupt. Did you have some other questions?
Well, I just thought it was pretty interesting with all the setbacks and what have you from the court system. I was just curious, could you address what's the motivation for you to keep going despite everything that you run into in the court system and the lack of understanding of what your children and what you had experienced?
Well, my motivation in all this is number one, when I realized that I wasn't the only person out there that had had their children abducted by the other parent and taken to another jurisdiction. When I found out that I wasn't the only parent that had alienation happening, where I wasn't able to have a relationship with my children, I realized there's millions of people out there all over the world that are going through the same exact thing, and they need to have a voice out, and there are many out there, by the way, that tells them you're not alone. You're not the only one that this happened to. You're not a freak of nature like I thought I was when it first happened. And so I started back when I was down there in Panama. I got so fed up with everything. I started through the help of a friend of mine who is originally from Venezuela. He helped teach me about Facebook, because I'd never been on it before that. He set me up a page. He taught me about it, and I started writing reflection articles. I started gaining traction, and people started listening to, or actually, I should say, reading what I was saying from all over the world. And before I knew it, I had a collection of followers from the US, from Canada, the UK, Australia, and things kept going from there, and, I kept up the reflection articles in support of these parents. But another thing was that I thought about our children, what the damage is happening to them. And I thought, something's got to be done about this, because I know that for many parents, when their children become adults, these negative effects have carried on with them into adult life. I mean, there could be earlier than normal sexual experimentation, drugs or alcohol, possibility of incarceration, disrespect to authority figures, and trust issues in future relationships. We need to put out that awareness about these things as well. But I think one of my biggest motivators on all this, and I have to tip my hat to her, that's my ex-wife.
Hmm.
I'm doing it to piss her off, letting her know that you're not keeping me on my knees. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to let the world, though I can't use her name, or her exact location. I don't want to get sued, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But she's monitoring my pages, and she knows that what I'm speaking about it are the experiences of what she's put me and my children through.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about reconnecting with your daughter in the past year. How long has it been, and what has that looked like in the reconnection?
She came back with last February or March in 2022, because she found me on social media and asked me, because it should be known that I do have sole custody of my children, but the ex-wife refused to obey court orders and bring it back to the US. So I still was at square one with everything. But once she got old enough, she found me on social media and says, "Hey, can I come back?" And it's like, sure. I made arrangements for a plane ticket and got the letter over and the custody papers. So since she was stopped at the airports, they could present those things to them. And fortunately, we got her here without a hitch,
How old is
and
she now?
she's 18.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good for you. Good ending there to part of your story.
Well, it's not over with yet, because I've still got my stepson over there in Australia, who we used to be awful close before the abduction, but he really doesn't want too much to do with me, as I understand. And I believe that's due to the brainwashing that the alienating mother perpetrated against me to the children. And as far as my daughter is concerned, there's a lot of issues going there. I don't think that the things that I mentioned, trust issues and everything else like that, I think that she's a perfect candidate for this, but unless she's diagnosed properly, no one knows. It could be the type of a deal that she's going through that stage in her life you know, where there's rebellion. Cause I know what kind of a kid I was as a teenager, you know,
Yep.
so that could have, something to play into the matter.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the issues that everybody runs into because, you have an unusual situation, but then if you're dealing with, let's say, an 18-year-old or a teenager or someone in high school, you can't separate the two. In other words, it's enough of a difficult situation anyway, because a lot of us remember how wild and crazy we were. And so trying to separate the two, and that's an extremely difficult thing to do. Now, since you were so involved in the court system, and this is interesting because a lot of us run into this, you had court orders and they may or may not be followed. But could you talk a little bit about the family court system and what could protect parents of who have been alienated? And how do you ensure the best interests of the children are followed, dealing with the court system as we all have?
Well, as far as the family court system, we're never going to have it perfect because these judges are human beings, with humanistic emotions and thoughts and everything else like that. So they're going to have certain prejudices. They're going to have certain biases. They're going to have their own individual thoughts. So they come up and they are going to carry it into the courtroom. As an example, with bias, maybe they don't like the sound of your voice or the color of your hair or the shoes that your attorney is wearing. They all of a sudden they're biased against you. And that can go, in the other person's favor when that happens. But you can have a judge that doesn't carry any bias. And I've used this analogy before, that the judge is on their way to work. They're running late. They're getting ready to get in their vehicle that morning to head off to the courtroom. The neighbor's dog runs up to that judge, pees on their pant leg. And now, depending on whether the neighbor is man or woman, now he's mad at all people of that gender. And he's going to exact his revenge in the courtroom, you know. But also, the way we can also partially fix some of this is that two things. Well, three things. Number one, judges have to get more education regarding family law and learn about parental alienation. Number two, they need to carry their courtrooms much like criminal courts. As an example, they've got a saying that says, he or she who lies first is typically believed in the family courts without evidence to back them up. Now, in criminal court, if you make an accusation or whatever, you better have proper documentation. You better have evidence and proof of this. Otherwise, you're going to go to jail. You could get fined or a combination of both, and we'll disregard what you just said. You know, now the other thing that would help out, which I don't, one parent requests, much like a criminal trial, when a parent requests to have a jury help in the decision of matters regarding who the children should be with, I think it should be made possible, because then you're taking these biases, the prejudices, the lack of knowledge, all that stuff out of a singular judge's hands, and you're putting in the hands of, well, I would assume probably six jurors because you're not going to get 12. And I think that's going to eliminate a lot of problems. It's going to lessen the impact on the target parent. More children's lives can be saved mentally and emotionally because now they're able to have both mom and dad in their life.
Yeah. And that's really the way it should be. Right? I mean, is both parents should be in their lives. And if there's accusations made, there should be evidence that is provided in a timely manner so the children are not separated so long. And the judge should be required to have to look at that evidence. I know, David, we're meeting for the first time, but that is my situation. However, the judge wanted to push off evidence and looking at things and evaluate the whole case and contempts and everything for a good 2 years. It then timed out with the guidelines from the Supreme Court. And so it was dismissed without resolution. Yes. So, you sound very much like me in that your therapy and the way you kind of work through things was support groups and things like that, but also making changes, right? Trying to, go to those right groups and write them and submit evidence and, follow through and make changes. And so I'm very respectful of that you're doing because I'm heavily involved in the Ohio change now for our bill. So it
Right.
was written in that it has to have clear and convincing evidence.
Yeah. And that's the thing there. When a parent is going through this, and obviously the same thing with the children, but many times we don't know about it until the child is ready and becomes an adult and they reflect back on it. But for the target parent, there's so many of them that become damaged. Some might develop PTSD, others go into depression, others, might become suicidal in their attempts to rectify things in a twisted kind of way. But the important part about it that you have to do is that, okay, you can't allow yourself to get to that point where you're damaged beyond repair. You have to go into a part of you, and many times you have to reach way deep down inside. You have to learn the art of self-healing. And it doesn't matter if you're going to the gym. It doesn't matter if you're spending a fun night out once a week with friends. It doesn't matter if you're taking a road trip. You can't sit there and self-isolate,
Yeah.
you know, and find some hobbies to put in your life. Myself, one of the things that helped me is writing. I've been writing my reflection articles for a number of years and it's helped. But it wasn't until I wrote my memoir book and I was able to put everything from start to finish on it, the good, the bad, the ugly, even against myself, that everything came to fruition. It was a healing aspect for me. And I was able to share my full story with others, so I encourage parents, you don't have to write a book if you don't want to. If you want to just post on social media, that's great. If you want to keep a personal journal that nobody will ever see and you want to pour out your feelings and your emotions, the main thing is you're getting those outside of you.
Yeah, I agree because you do feel alone no matter what, right? I mean, and that's one reason Mick and I started this podcast is we don't want parents to feel alone. That's why you started what you're doing, David, is because it's so important when you do feel alone and you're like, whoa, nobody talks about this. And you figure out that none of the parents were talking about it because they felt guilty, right? How do you tell somebody that you lost your kids, right? They're going to say, well, what did they do wrong? Right. And that doesn't, that's not necessarily true. So it's hard for a lot of parents to go through. And, we are supporting those parents because it's tough. I mean, it's been tough on us, right? All three of us.
Right. And that's the thing is that when a parent loses their children to parental abduction or alienation, most times it's not their fault. They have no reason to be shamed or filled with embarrassment, for what someone else who obviously has some underlying mental health issues or personality defects going on. They just happen to be caught up in their web of deceit with the wrong person. You know, these things are going to happen, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from or how rich or poor or famous or powerful. If alienation comes knocking at your door, you better stand ready.
Yes.
Could you say something about the response that you had? Because it's kind of interesting, a person who is a real neophyte when it came to social media, but then you got out there on social media. Could you talk a little bit about what you found as a response from people, and then also the kind of resources and support that they could get with what you have experienced and what they've been able to benefit from? And like you said, you're writing and other things you talked about.
Well, as far as the responses that I get, quite often I get people that private message me and even make comments in the things that I write and share, where they tell me that over the years I've been a great help to them. And, myself, I don't really see it because I'm one of them. I belong to the club,
Mhm.
and so it's hard for me to recognize the good that I'm doing, but they tell me this all the time. But I needed to go a step further other than writing the reflection articles, because these people need more than just a few words on a, 3 or 4 or 500 word article. They needed resources and they needed to hear from just me. So I started up a blog recently. It's still under construction, but it is viewable and you can go to different things on it, but it's for alienated and left behind parents where they can get access to contacting therapists in their area. They can read articles from the experts. They can order books from the experts. They can watch YouTube videos. Then we're starting at the podcasts, which we'll put yours on there as well in the next day or so. But we're going to do podcasts from others. And we're going to continue to build this because I notice that, when it comes to blog websites, the only ones that are really out there are made by attorneys and psychologists. There really are. I mean, I search high and low. It's like, where are these websites at for these people? So it's like, okay, I click on this one, got some great information, but they want me to go ahead and hire them. That's not what this is about. This is about
Yeah.
dispensing the necessary and much needed information to help these parents during a rough patch in their life. Now, the next thing I did was I went ahead and created a YouTube channel. We've got about 4 videos up there. And you have to understand when it comes to YouTube videos, everyone makes it seem like it's easy, that we're all experts getting in front of a camera. I look like a blooming idiot there, especially, but I'm hoping that through time and practice, they'll get better. But the information I'm putting on there is not like a lot of these other parental alienation videos out there by these experts and stuff. I'm talking to the folks in real manners, you know, as someone who's not just got some knowledge in this area, but someone who's actually lived it. As an example, I did one video that I thought was much needed information. It was about options of a left behind parent. And it takes people from start to finish of what they need to do to protect themselves and children if they suspect or actually has had it happen when their child is abducted by the other parent and taken to another jurisdiction, be it here in the US or overseas. And I put out everything that they need. I haven't never seen on YouTube another video for that, you know. But so we've got that. I'm on the LinkedIn. We've got my Facebook page that they can always come to, you know, uh, for Hopeful Father. That's where a lot of people come to get a lot of information. So I'm doing everything I can, but I'm a one man band and I can sure use some help.
Yeah, but it takes a couple of you, and I appreciate what you're doing because it takes a couple of us to do this. Hundreds of us. I'm learning as we do this, there's a lot more people out there that are doing their efforts, right? And doing their part. And if we could just help one parent, you were referred to some parents that commit suicide, and I've seen several posts this week from parents that have committed suicide. And if we can just save one parent by letting them know we're there for them, reach out with a phone call, read something, write something, help yourself, you know, I think we've done our job because it's tough.
Right. And we got to do it as a labor of love,
Mhm.
and, I see too many of these people that are out there that are on the social media. They're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube and all this other stuff. And they're advertising themselves like crazy. But in the end, they're advertising themselves to suffering who are dead broke because they're paying for psychologists, they're paying for attorneys, they're paying court costs, they're paying child support and all this other stuff. But they've all got their hands in the pockets of these people who are broke and they don't mind. Everything that I'm doing, it's free. I've had to fund, even though it's been difficult, I've had to fund the cost of the equipment to set up these videos. I've had to set up the cost of setting up the blog and all the stuff that I put into it, and, it doesn't cost them nothing. It doesn't cost me nothing. It's free resources, and I wish more people to do that on that are out there with their viewing audience.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very proud of you, David, from coming from learning Facebook from your friend from Venezuela to now you're on YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, we're moving up here.
Hey, you want to come and join? I need some help. But
Could you
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, could you well, I was gonna say we had mentioned you do have an assistant, do you not, that's helping you with the YouTube?
And the blog, actually, that is my youngest boy. It's
There you go.
amazing. It's amazing that he's just under 13 years old, but it's amazing what these kids know as far as technology and stuff. It's like, now I told my son, I said, now we need to go ahead and set up this blog. How do we set this up? He does everything for me, you know, and then it's like, okay, we need to go ahead and get the YouTube going, and he'll film me, and then he'll go ahead and upload it, and then he'll download it, and then he'll go ahead and edit it, and then he'll go ahead and do other things to it, set up the thumbnail banners for it and the intro
Yep.
and outro. And it's like,
They can do
Jesus,
it 5 times faster than us, right?
yeah. Cause I'm looking at this stuff and I'm trying to learn from it. Like, at my old age, it's the type of deal that it ain't happening. I'll just keep on paying him.
There you go. That's the answer. Smarter,
But
work harder, or work smarter, not harder, right? Isn't that what they say?
oh, exactly. Well, I give him some money each week and stuff, and it's good for him because we're able to do something together as father and son. It allows him also to have his own money because he's got his own checking account now at his age.
Yeah.
So he's got his debit card. If he wants to order something off of Amazon or eBay or something like that, because he's really into the old computers and he's kind of a tech nerd,
Yeah.
so it's like he doesn't have to come to me for the money. He just goes to his own bank account on the money he's earned from me, and he makes purchases I don't even know about him.
Yeah. That's great. And like you said, you're doing something together and he sees that the bigger picture that you're out there helping other humans that are going through a really hard time.
Right. And even though he's smart, the nice part about it is that he's not super privileged on the main focus of the topic that I do. And that's a good thing. He's
Yeah.
too young and too innocent to know some of this crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I suppose my biggest message for the alienated and left behind parents out there is to know that you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there we're here for you. We're willing to support you. We're willing to take time to listen to you and provide you resources for what you're going through and what you need to get over this hump. You know, and if you're ever nervous about sharing your story, don't. As an example, I'm one of the few people who've actually shared their story in my from start to finish, and I'm putting it out there for the world to read. And for most people, they're like, "Crap, that's got to be embarrassing." And it's like, no, it really isn't. It's letting other folks know that this is real.
Why is that? Let's spend some time on it. Why is it embarrassing to tell our stories, right? People aren't embarrassed if they're an alcoholic anymore or if they have mental health issues or, everything seems to be talked about. But for some reason, with this topic, it is embarrassing for people. And I don't understand why.
Well, these parents should not feel embarrassed about their situation. Like I say, they happen to get unfortunate and roped into an individual who is an alienator, but they wore a mask of deception cinched up so tight that no one recognized them. So they shouldn't be embarrassed about that. But as far as when the alienation or the abduction occurs, they shouldn't be embarrassed about that either because it's not their fault.
Right.
You
And I
know,
think you alluded to that earlier. Most parents, all parents in this situation, nothing has happened, right? Nothing has happened to cause this. It is just the person that they were with accusations.
All right. And see, the same thing is going on with the alienator. They spread lies about you to their
Mhm.
family, their friends, their coworkers, or anyone that will listen to them because they want to be able to justify their actions for what they're doing. Because if they don't, then they're afraid that these other people that they're telling these lies to are going to think that what's happening is their fault and instead of the target parent's fault. They can't have that,
Yeah.
you know?
They
So
have to deflect, right? It's got to
I'm
be,
sorry.
it's to deflect. They're deflecting, right? The alienating parent is deflecting, something they've done or something they're covering up or something that they're not secure with. And they have to target the other parent, the targeted parent, because they have to deflect what they've done, right? So they have to come up with some reason to attack and make that other person look bad.
Right. And then the other thing that a lot of these parents, the reason they're so quiet on their subject is because, and this is actually true, I know this for a fact, is that on their Facebook page, they're tracking the alienator or an associate of the alien is tracking the movements online of the target parent. So they'll go in there and find out, okay, is this parent, and they'll do searches through the group. Is this parent saying anything about me or the things I've done or children, whether it's on their individual Facebook page or in one of the groups? And what these alienators do, and they even got their attorneys that'll do this for them, they'll take that and use it as evidence against the target parent in the family courtroom.
Hmm.
And these parents know this is going to happen. So that's why they'll go into these sites, but they won't comment. They won't reply. They won't do nothing. They're just kind of like a shadow in the background. You know, they want the information, but they can't let anyone know that they're there.
Here's the thing: is the alienating parent is very in what they're doing, even though you might think that your ex partner or spouse or whatnot
Mhm.
might not be. They're very strategic and they manipulate. It's usually not seen. They're very good on face to face meetings and, earning people's trust very early on.
Oh, yeah.
And once they do, then they're able to tell their lies. And all it's doing to the targeted parent is attacking them. And what we're doing is boiling inside, right? And we're getting mad and we're getting defensive. And because all of these emotions and we can't do anything, our hands are tied, our kids are taken from us. We've had protection orders issued against us. The court doesn't believe us, right? And so all that's manifesting in us. So when we do use social media as an example, as an outlet, that's not a good decision for us as targeted parents because you're right. It comes off as we're crazy. We're losing our mind. It's justifying what they're saying and all the lies, right? So we have to think of it a little differently, a little bit more strategically, that we can't be that defensive parent. We also, in the sense of a word, have to play a game because they started, right? And it's just chess
Mhm.
pieces to make sure you're making the right moves. But being that aggressive, upset, defensive, no, 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 I've got all this proof. That's not going to be the right answer on how you go about telling your story because it's only going to make you look crazy, which is what they're saying that you're.
And, you know,
I can
it's funny
follow up.
you should mention about crazy. A friend of mine who was big as an activist up there in New York, Dr. Carlos Rivera. I remember a few years ago, he says, if we weren't crazy before, we certainly are now after going through all this mess.
That's so true. What
Now,
were you going to say, Mick?
I was going to jump in there because, here I had experience to counsel kids that were in Central Juvenile Hall, all gang related kids in LA. And
Mhm.
they were in there for some things that they didn't do. And I'd ask them, well, doesn't it bother you that you're in jail for something that you didn't do? And it was interesting. The response was no, because I did all kinds of other things that I didn't get caught for. So it's la loca vida, it's the crazy life. But what Kindra is addressing, the person who truly is innocent and hasn't done anything is fighting mad and does get defensive because we are innocent. And that's what offends us so much. So that's why I was saying it's really interesting, because the person who's truly guilty, they don't feel guilt about things. But the person who's truly innocent does get defensive. But I agree with Kinder's point that be very careful, though, when you go in public or on Facebook or anywhere else, because that other person is very strategic and they're using that information to get you so against you. So be careful with that stuff.
Well, exactly. And they're strategic in getting these things because you have to understand the mindset of an alienator. Number one, they're hardwired differently than what the mainstream society is. Okay. Now, when you get hooked up with an alienator, obviously they, like I say, they have an underlying mental health issue most times, or it's a personality defect. But with them, you think you're choosing them as a partner. That's really not true. They're seeking you out, the kind of person that they can control. They are going to exploit your weaknesses, and then they're going to go ahead and tell you all the nice things that that you're craving to hear, I should say, and everything else like that. And then once they get you roped into it, if the relationship or marriage fails, here's what happens. The control that they once had over you physically and wholly is now lessened. These alienators don't want to lose any aspect of control because they like to control their personal being. They like to control their children. They like to control their spouse, their household, their work environment, whatever. Control is a big issue for them. And so what they'll do, part of the things is that they want to go back and regain part of what they've lost in this control issue. The best way to do that with their former partner is through the use of the children, because now they may not be able to control you physically, but they can control you mentally and emotionally. And what is through the use of the children, that's the best way to do it. If they deny you visits, if they turn the child against you by getting them to forget who you are or hating you or whatever, they've achieved a portion of their objective of control.
Mhm. And, I want to take this one step further too, since we're talking social media as an aspect. Your children find you, right? As you suggested, David, through social media. So they're also watching you. So what you are doing is either validating what the alienating parent is suggesting that you're doing, right? Um, or you can be doing the opposite. And so when they do reach out and find you, they can be like, oh, wait a second. This isn't exactly what my mother or father was telling me. They're actually concerned. They're missing me, right? They're a good person. Here's what they're doing. So be visible, just be strategically visible, I guess. Just be aware, I guess, is more of the thing. Be aware of what you're posting, right? I know one thing that I share on my public pages is the times and the memories with my kids, because
Mhm.
that is something, if they get on your social media and they're seeing, it can trigger a memory and say, oh, I do kind of remember that. This isn't the way that, dad made it seem like. I remember that. That was a good memory, right?
Right.
Um, so I think you have to be aware of that as well.
Right. But that's why I'm very careful. I don't mention my children's names. I don't mention where the children's mother, none of that. What I talk about is generalized areas of parental alienation and abduction and stuff. And my name's out there far and wide, obviously, in many different countries. But what it's actually doing in the way that I'm presenting things, it's leaving cookie crumbs for the children to one day find and follow.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. I like that. I'm taking several things away from you, right? Pig on or lipstick on a pig or a bow tie on them, or yeah, I'm taking lots of things away. Well, David, what was the name of your book again?
It's called Stolen Memories. But to find it, believe it or not, after I'd already written it, I did a Google search on that through Amazon. And it turns out there's a few different books called Stolen Memories. So if someone ever does decide they'd like to check it out, it's Stolen Memories, and they got to put my full name in there of David R. Schubert, to
Perfect.
find the right one. And, it's right now it's in ebook form. And by the way, come Monday, it's going to go on a week long promotion on the ebook one for, I think, $1.99.
No, perfect.
But we also have the paperback version, which I just got. And believe it or not, it took me 2 weeks to get the darn thing. And they charged me
That's
for
actually fast. Oh, they charged you for your own there you go.
Well, with my first book I did through CreateSpace back in 2017, authors got a free couple of copies, not no more,
Yeah.
but I've also got it in a hard book form that a couple people have ordered and stuff. And I've had someone approach me that's saying, "Hey, I don't read books in paper form. If you ever come out with audio, let me know and I'll go ahead and pick that up." But my problem is that I'd love to do it, but you're looking at two, three, $4,000 to get an audiobook created, and I ain't rich.
Right. I think you have a son though that might be a great transcriber of it if you need somebody to read it.
It's possible. But now that I've got that one done now, through the courage of about 6 different parents in a few different countries, they've granted me permission to share their stories in book form as well. Though, just like mine, the names of the boom of these people will be changed along as well as their children and stuff. And here in the next month, I'll start writing their stories in a condensed book form, and we'll be putting that out as well. And hopefully that'll inspire other parents to become a little more vocal.
That's fantastic. That's great.
And you had some other resources too. I noticed if you got a web page and you got some experts on there, could you talk a little bit about that and some other things that you have that are what you mentioned, they're free. So like people would
Yeah.
make out of them.
Well, unless they order the books, those aren't free. But as far as the website, it's called A Parenting Affair. And the web address is aparentingaffair.com. And then, we've got the resources out there. We're going to be adding a whole lot of stuff in addition to what I've already mentioned. We want to set up legal resources for these folks as well, and a few other things. Before it's all done, we're going to start putting, when we get enough subscribers, we're going to put out a weekly newsletter for them and things along that nature. Um, and then we're going to actually, for conferences that go on around the country, trying to get a list of the people that set up conferences that these folks may wish to attend. So that way they can advertise their conference, their location, and the date of the conference, and contact them to get tickets for it. Now, the other thing that I'd like to say, we've got our YouTube channel, which is also the same name. It's called A Parenting Affair, the video. So all they have to do is log into YouTube and type up that name, and it'll bring up, if you go to the logo of A Parenting Affair, it'll bring up all the videos at once, except one individual and there's another one below that. But you got to understand, I'm not an expert when it comes to speaking in front of a camera. It takes time and patience. And so, fact is, I just got, a message from one of my network, people over there on LinkedIn. And he sent me a thing saying, "Hey, you're doing a great job on your videos. However, this might be a couple things you may want to change." But he says the main thing is practice. You're doing a good job with the information you're putting out there, but you'll get more natural the more practice you do and the more videos you.
That is so true. And Mick and I are also novice to this, right? I mean, this is, you know, something that we do just to help parent well. And I think that's what's really neat about us three is we're real. We're bringing real stories to the table and we're having real conversations about what is happening out there.
Right, right. And I think that's fantastic. I think we need more people out there to do even more podcasts. I know that I've another show to do. Well, I've got one actually later on today, but one for tomorrow. And he's just started up about 3 years ago doing that. And we need more of these folks because the ones that, when I used to do interviews previously a few years back, and I had stopped them for about 3 or 4 years, probably half of them are no longer doing them anymore. And they've just kind of dropped off the map. And I don't know where they are. But as that happens, more and more new people are coming onto the scene, and I think that's a wonderful thing because everyone has something to contribute
Yep. We're just parents. We're just targeted parents.
that have nothing to be embarrassed about.
That's right. That's right.
Now, and another thing there, you were talking about what I have, on the internet and stuff of the things that I have to offer. Where a lot of people find me is on my Facebook page because I actually have two pages. One is a group page called I Was Erased, so they can go ahead and get on. But my main page is actually my personal page, and it's called facebook.com/hopeful father. Now, I'm typically always maxed out on at 5,000 friends, but they can still click it and it just makes them followers. They can still get the same notifications. They can still go in and check out what my new postings are. But that's a good way for them to find me and find the other things that we have.
Wonderful. Well, Mick, do you have anything to close this out?
Well, you know what I always say is that if you like the show and appreciate David for spending some time with us today and all the amazing resources that you have. So we thank you for that. But of course, Kendra and I have something as well, because between the two of us, one of us is a juvenile delinquent and one is what's the other person, Kendra?
I think it's maybe a jailbird.
A jailbird and a juvenile delinquent, but the guess is which one of us is which. But yes, we do have a free ebook for you. So if you like the show, please subscribe, like, share, positively review us on Apple Podcasts. And other than that, we do have an ebook. So get in touch with us and you can get us at theaftermathhealing@gmail.com. And that's great for a show and other things that you would like to have. We'd like to have your support. And we're out here for you. As David says, and I'll reiterate that you are not alone. So till the next episode of The Aftermath, thank you, David, for being our guest, and Kendra for hanging in there, even being on the road. Till next time, Deus Volt.
Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Mick. I appreciate it. And I enjoyed being